What's up, y'all, and welcome into the Jack Vita Show. I'm your host, Jack Vita. We're live right now on Facebook and Twitter. We're going to talk some trade deadline stuff today with the MLB trade deadline quickly approaching. Today is Thursday, July 27th, 2023. The trade deadline will be early next week. So today we're going to discuss a little bit of what's happened so far and what we might see in the coming days and maybe a little more baseball along the way. We have a phenomenal person joining us today, the top newsbreaker in the game, the Bob father himself, Mr. Bob Nightengale from USA Today. Bob, great to have you here.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you, Jack.
You like that, the Bob father? Anyone call you
I
that?
like that. No, that's a good one. That's new. It's new.
He's one of the big names in this game, and he's got a lot of ins and information. And one of the places I know that he's been really at the forefront of reporting and breaking stuff before it happens, or talking about things that could happen, is with the Chicago White Sox. And I know he was just on a Chicago White Sox podcast, so a lot of this stuff is fresh for him. We had a big trade last night, Bob. It was right before I went to sleep. The Chicago White Sox parted ways with Lucas Giolito, Reynaldo Lopez. They got 5 players in return, most notably the Los Angeles Angels, number 2 and number 3 prospects. There's a lot to be discussed here, both from the Angels side and the White Sox side. Before we do the White Sox, let's talk about the Angels. Obviously, this is very significant because this is a big indicator of what the Angels are going to be doing here in the second half. The Angels are going for it. They are not trading Ohtani.
No, they were never trading Ohtani, and that's what was driving the Angels crazy. I saw Artie Moreno in Cooperstown, and he goes, "How come people aren't talking about the Yankees trading Aaron Judge?" It was a joke.
Yeah.
They were never trading Shohei Ohtani. So yeah, I mean, and then they kind of doubled down by saying, we're not only letting everybody know that Ohtani is not going anywhere, so quit calling us that we get a starter and they get a reliever. So. Lucas Giolito should help them, and they got some bullpen help as well. Cost them their second, third prospects, but not like the Angels have a deep farm system.
Yeah.
They don't need a catcher, and the catcher is considered. He might be more of a strong backup catcher in the big leagues. Maybe a starting catcher, but not an all-star caliber by any means. And the pitcher, but back end of the rotation type guy. So to try to go for it, you move those guys.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that they were never trading Ohtani because I've been saying the same thing. I know you've been saying the same thing. Obviously, we both have people that we talk to with the Angels, and this was never on the table in any way. I mean, I think the only way that this could have ever happened is if the Angels were so disastrously terrible and Ohtani flat out said, "I'm not coming back." But to my knowledge, it does not appear that he's given any indication that he would not be open to returning to the club. It sounds like he's willing to talk. It sounds like he's willing to play ball. And who knows, that might be the place that he wants to stay in. So if you want to keep this player that's a generational player that we're talking about already as perhaps the greatest player of all time or one of the greatest players of all time, then you cannot trade him in the middle of the season, especially when the Angels are only 4 games out of a playoff spot.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, Jack. I mean, the only way they would have traded him if he had come in there and demanded a trade. And everybody
Yeah.
knows that Shohei Ohtani knew that wasn't going to happen.
No.
So yeah, I mean, and they want to re-sign him. If you trade him, you have zero chance of re-signing him. Now they got a shot, and they got a better chance than people think. If they make the playoffs, they might have as good a chance as anybody. I mean, he just wants to be on a team that's competitive to make the playoffs. I remember after the All-Star game, the fans were serenading him, and he said nice things about Seattle, and so everybody got hyped up. They're like, "Oh, the Shohei Ohtani now want to go to Seattle." I said, "Look, the Mariners have only made the playoffs once in 21 years. If he wants that, he might as well stay in Anaheim." So he just wants
Right.
to win, and the best chance of keeping him is they make the playoffs, at least make a strong run, so he has fun again.
It's funny you mentioned the Yankees because I was seeing so much from New York press and fans, especially on Twitter, saying that the Yankees need to trade for Ohtani. Well, the Yankees couldn't even beat Ohtani last week. They got swept by the Angels. So, like,
Yeah. And we might as well come out and say that the Angels need Aaron Judge.
yeah.
Same thing. Go that route.
Angels have a better run differential than the Yankees, by the way. And speaking of talking about the Angels' playoff chances, I know I've talked about this a little bit on my show and also in some of my columns with Inside the Phillies with my MLB Power Rankings with Sports Illustrated. Um, I really do think that this Angels team is significantly better than the teams that we've seen in the last few years. Do you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. I think they're, as we speak, they're 18 games better than a year ago.
Hmm.
Uh, they're just a deeper, more rounded team. I mean, look at that team compared to the San Diego Padres. Hey, they don't have nearly the star power, but they're a deeper team. They can withstand injuries, and they got a guys about bottom of the order, that can produce. And that's what's killed the Padres. It just the way they're constructed has been terrible, and that's why the Angels have a much better record.
Yeah, and take a look, if you go back to 2021, you take a look at the names in that lineup compared to what the names are in the lineup now. I mean, I really think Perry Minasian has done a really good job of bringing in some young talent. He traded for Logan O'Hoppe, he traded for Mickey Moniak, and even though O'Hoppe has not gotten to play much this year, the type of talent that we're talking about with him is a Buster Posey, JT Realmuto type elite catcher for potentially a decade, and they got him for Brandon Marsh. They also got Mickey Moniak for Noah Syndergaard, and Moniak is playing like a star. He's playing like that number one overall pick that the Phillies made him back in 2016. So they've got some nice young pieces. I like some of the guys they added. I like Urshela was playing very well for them before he got hurt. Brandon Drury was someone that was in the All-Star conversation at second base. They got him and really didn't have to spend a whole lot of money. I think, like you said, Bob, I think there's a lot more depth in this lineup than we've seen in the past few years, where I think the last few years it was really just Ohtani, Trout, and Rendon. And when Trout or Rendon or any of them really is hurt, that really, really hurt them a lot. And now they have a lot more depth. So if Rendon is going to miss time, like he is right now, it's not killing them the way it was a couple years ago.
No, it's not. And due to this all the injuries they've had, they've been smacked around,
Yeah.
particularly with Trout. Rendon really hasn't played for them since he signed. But yeah, they've been crushed with injuries to pitching staff and losing their catcher. So no, it's a credit for Perry Minasian. Done a very good job. It's too bad they didn't, stick out for Garrett Cole. When they lost Garrett Cole, they turned to Rendon. That $245 million would have bought you a whole lot of pitching, and
Yeah.
they wouldn't be in this predicament.
Yeah, and the pitching has been really the greater need for them over the past several years. I mean, that's where their lineup has been, like we said, I think this is a pretty good lineup this year. At what we're looking at, it's a good lineup. Their bullpen has been very good. With Carlos Estevez has been a lockdown closer out of nowhere, really. And now they add Reynaldo Lopez to that bullpen. But the starting pitching has really been their weakness. The rotation is average to below average. So what do you think they're adding here? I know it's a rental with Giolito, but what are they getting here with Giolito?
Good question, Jack. I'm not sure what they're getting. He'll give you innings. He's never been really he's never pitched under that pressure. So the jury's out on that. Some teams stayed away thinking, can he handle it? It was a knock on him in Washington. Certainly he's got a lot of talent, a roll of talent. He's coming back home. So we'll see how he handles it. But yeah, I don't think anybody should say, okay, here's a number two starter behind Ohtani. I know he's slotted that way. We'll see how he performs. But I'm curious to see, how he does too.
Yeah, I think you're looking at a number three, number four type guy. Maybe number three seems like where he fits in. But I will say, if there was a spot for him that could be a good change of scenery for him, is returning back home to Los Angeles, being in Southern California, could be a nice change of pace, change of scenery. Similar to how I think Moniak coming back from the East Coast, coming back home to Southern California seems to have been something that was a positive for him as well.
Yeah, sometimes guys just need to change the scenery. Like I think all the White Sox guys will do better just being away from Chicago, just because it's been a bad clubhouse culture there for years. Players haven't performed well for four straight managers now. So I think a guy like Lance Lynn will be much better. If Aaron Bummer's traded, I'm not sure he will. He'll be much better. So yeah, I think we'll see a lot of improvements by White Sox guys that leave.
So we'll get to the White Sox in a second. One last thing on the Angels, Bob. Do you think there are two things real quick? One, do you think there are more moves coming before the deadline for this club?
I don't think so. It could be maybe a minor move, getting Candelario from Washington, that sort of thing. So maybe some minor moves, nothing major. They've crossed the tax threshold. I guess you can see if you're going to cross it, might as well cross it big. But we'll see. But I don't see a lot in store for them. Like I said, just minor improvements, but not big name.
And then coming back to Ohtani, one thing again, I get how it goes. I know people get paid by page clicks and radio hosts get paid by reactions. So I think a lot of this is drumming up talk and getting clicks and attention. But I feel like I've heard a lot from, again, outside sources, not the people that have been in the locker room like you have, that are saying it's a foregone conclusion. Ohtani's leaving for sure. He's not coming back to the Angels. I don't believe that at all. I think that there's a good chance he comes back. What do you think that the free agent market is really going to look for? How many teams realistically do you think are going to be in play for his services?
Probably three or four. Not many. I mean, when you get the high price tag, there's never, many teams involved. I mean, obviously you got the Angels, you got the Dodgers, the Padres always spin wildly, so I'll throw them in there. And San Francisco Giants, they probably need
Yeah.
him more than anybody because they need to sell tickets. The attendance is down. The city hasn't been the same since the pandemic. So I'll go with those four teams.
Only West Coast teams, right?
Yeah, he's not interested in New York or anything else. He did have the Cubs on his original list. Obviously, he didn't sign there. He had Texas on the original list. Didn't sign there. But he likes it, he likes the lifestyle. He doesn't go out, just eats and sleeps, baseball. Recently, about a month ago, I think the Angels were in New York. So all the New York writers asked Ohtani, hey, what do you think about New York City? He goes, I don't know. He goes, I went to stay on the team bus, went home, on the team bus. I never went out in the city at all. And that's him. He just likes to, focus everything on baseball, eats, sleeps in his, condo, and that's it.
Yeah. And it's a lot closer to back home in Japan. It also allows the fans, it's easier for the fans to watch the games because they start 3 hours later. So if he's playing on the East Coast, the games are going to start around 8 a.m. for the fans in Japan. But if he's playing on the West Coast, then they're starting at 11 a.m. on the West Coast. I think that's important to him.
Yeah, I mean, he wants people to be able to see his games, absolutely. And also for fans of Japan to be able to fly in. I
Yeah.
mean, you're talking about if you go to a place like New York, you had 5 hours that flight. Like you said, and who wants to watch games at 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock in the morning?
Yeah. And then on the topic of the with Ohtani, those four teams you mentioned, I think me just kind of critically thinking, I haven't talked to these teams at all, but at some point you just have to wonder, with San Diego losing a lot of money, how much more are they going to be able to spend? I don't know if that's going to stop them. And then the Giants, the other question I would have with them is they have not been able to land, and they got Correa, but that didn't end up going through. Last big time free agent they signed was Johnny Cueto in 2016. That was a little while ago. So they haven't been able to land the Harpers or the Judges or the Trey Turners of the sport. So I wonder if either of those teams are going to have an edge. I think he's probably going to end up in either LA or LA.
Yeah, could I don't dismiss San Francisco in the sense that hey, if you're pitching National League West, that's where you want to be. All the Cy Young winners come from there. It's the
Yeah, that's
best
true.
pitching division in baseball. Great ballpark to pitch in. Obviously, good sized Asian community up there. And I just think they'll offer the most because let's be honest. I mean, the Dodgers sell it every game. the Padres sell out every game. Angels draw well, but nobody can make more money off Ohtani than the Giants can. But yeah, we'll see. I think the Dodgers, they tell me they'd be buying the brand. All of a sudden, everybody in Japan will be Dodger fans. Angels know what kind of revenue he brings. Player wise and revenue wise, probably the Padres are making out the least.
In speaking of the Dodgers and what's in, oh Bob, you're black screen again. Can't see you. Oh, there, you're back.
Oh, okay.
It'll be really interesting to see how this thing goes, because it does seem like I would think that the Angels, especially after they were able to first of all sign Ohtani in the first place, they got him to come there in the first place, and they also were able to lock up Trout. I have to think that Moreno and that organization is going to be willing to pony up the money. I'm not concerned about that. It'll be interesting to see if he wants to stay there, but we haven't seen any indications. There haven't been any quotes from Ohtani about him not being happy there, to my knowledge. It seems like he's enjoyed playing there. Obviously, he's found a great amount of success, and then if they can make a little push here, I think they can sell him on a future where they do have some nice young pieces, and potentially they want to go out and maybe add a little more this offseason.
No, absolutely. And the only quote he said is that I want to win. Losing sucks. That's it. Everybody else is playing guessing games, and nobody knows Ohtani. So whoever says what Ohtani is thinking is lying, because nobody knows what he's thinking. We just know he's happy in a market, in a market where nobody bothers him on the streets, where you can go out and talk to people and things like that. So I think he stays. I'm with either one of the two LA teams.
Yeah, and if the one last thing on the Angels, I think that the managerial change seems to be a net positive for the club too. It seems like there's a little more buy-in with Phil Nevin. What do you think?
No, nice job. I mean, he would have been fired last year if the team wasn't for sale. They said, okay, who wants a 1-year contract? If it was the team wasn't for sale, Bruce Bochy be managing that team, so that was their guy. It would have been Buck Showalter a couple of years ago. So, Nevin's done a nice job, and they make the playoffs. Nevin will definitely be back.
Why wasn't Buck managing instead of Joe Madden? What happened there?
Artie Moreno. It was almost like a deal was already set up or something, but it was almost Artie wanted Madden, who was more of a household name. Obviously came up the World Series in 2016 and everything else. So he just went that route. So even though Showalter was Billy Epler's choice, he got overruled.
All right, so on the White Sox side of things, I got to ask you, Bob, is this the start of like a big snowball that's going to roll, and we're going to see a flurry of trades over the next few days with this club?
No, just they don't have players people want. They're not trading Dylan Cease. He's off limits. People have tried, said no, quit calling. We're not trading Dylan Cease. I ain't sure if Aaron Bummer's available. But yeah, I mean, Lance Lynn obviously is. Nobody wants Grandal. McCarty, haven't heard a thing on. Nobody, obviously, they're not trading Luis Robert. So that's about it. I mean, it's going to be a small things. We'll see about a Joe Kelly, a Middleton. But yeah, nothing big.
No Tim Anderson, no Eloy Jimenez.
No, I think if somebody made a nice offer for Jimenez, they'd move him. Anderson, just the way he's performed, the value is just cratered. Even the Dodgers could use him more than anybody. They just got two infielders instead and passed on him.
Speaking of value cratering for teams and players, what's the latest on Marcus Stroman and the Cubs? What do you think the Cubs are going to do here?
I thought a few days ago they were going to trade both him and Bellinger, and they could sell their fans on, okay, we're going to try to sign them as free agents, but let's get something back in return. So they could still do that. But I think the fact the NL Central is so weak, the fact they've been winning games. Now I got to think that they're going to hang on to those guys and try to go for it. I don't think they want the fan backlash as far as just surrendering when the division is so weak and they have as good a chance as anybody to win it. I don't think they will, but they still have a fighting chance.
I think the Cubs are in a really tough spot here. I think they're stuck, and they're on the cusp of being stuck in this middle ground for the next several years because they really don't have. I mean, look, there are a few prospects, top 100 guys, but they're not that close to being big impact guys, and none of them are really dominating in their respective minor leagues. This isn't the Cubs of 2014 when you already had Rizzo up in the big leagues. You already had Soler and Baez getting a cup of coffee in the big leagues with Chris Bryant, Albert Almora, Kyle Schwarber, that whole crew coming up, Addison Russell. This isn't that. Like, this is a team that is right now, I think, an average team at best. I know some people will point to the positive run differential. We'll see if that's indicative of things to come in the second half if they do flip a switch and improve. But, I mean, really, I just see a team right now that's pretty average, and I don't really see a path for them to get much better. And I think that they would be in a better spot in the long term if they sold Bellinger, if they sold Stroman, if they sold Yan Gomes and Hendricks. I think all four of those are really solid pieces that would be attractive pieces on the open market right now. But like you said, Bob, I mean, they've won 5 straight games. I think they've won 7 of 8. They're 4.5 out of a wild card spot. I think their hands are tied. I think maybe they would like to cash in on some of those chips, but I don't really think they can, especially for that fear of the fan backlash.
Yeah, just a backlash of we get so upset if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out, and they will there be a little, people quit showing up for the ballpark, will attendance drop? I mean, Stroman's value's dropped. What are you going to get from Marcus Stroman now? He makes a lot of money, so I'm not sure, what you can return. Bellinger, if you did get a decent return, not a great one. I mean, everybody could have had him in the offseason and passed. I also think there's zero chance that they would re-sign him as a free agent. His agent, Scott Boras, he's had a big year, so I would think there'd be a massive price tag on him, over $100 million. So I think he's going to be sitting out till next February and signing in, right around spring training sort of deal. So, and I think a lot of teams still have the juries out on Bellinger. I mean, the Dodgers are smarter than everybody, resources, money, and they gave up on him. And so I don't think they thought he was going to do what he's doing, but I'm not sure how many people think he's going to sustain this either.
I think I think it'd be difficult for the Cubs to give, if we're talking like a 5-year, $100 million contract. Is that what you're thinking neighborhood wise for Bellinger? 4-year, 5-year, 100?
I bet they asked for more than that. I wouldn't be surprised if they asked for at least 150.
Okay, so that's a lot. And like you said, there is the potential for him to regress. This is a great first half, and he does look very good. I think it's tough to make that move after you extended Ian Happ, and you already have Seiya Suzuki also. Those guys are under contract now through 2026, so you're locked into 2 outfield spots already. And what's supposed to be the strength of the farm system is their outfielders. So eventually you're going to want to have those guys be able to play. And that Ian Happ contract is already looking pretty bad right now. I know it's not a back-breaking amount of money, but this is a guy who's going to be owed $60 million over the next 3 years after this one. And really what you have in him is a 240 bat that doesn't slug, not a big extra base hit or home run guy, but draws a lot of walks. That's really in the corner outfield, you typically want a bigger bat than that. So with the Happ contract, I feel like if they had held back and traded Happ, then maybe the Bellinger signing becomes more likely. But it's going to be difficult to have all 3 of those contracts. And I mean, they're really not getting, I think, what they were hoping to out of Suzuki at this point either.
No, I think Suzuki's been a disappointment. They won't come out and say it, but I think they expected a lot more than this. So, we'll see. You draw walks are fine if you're going to steal second base and third base. If you're not stealing second or third, the walks are useless. All you're doing is clogging the base paths.
Right. And I mean, with Happ, he's batting third. So it's not like you really want your number 3 guy looking for walks, aggressively looking for walks. You want him to hit.
No, right.
Your leadoff guy, you want him to hit, or the leadoff guy you want to get on base. But yeah, all right. So we're both thinking the Cubs are really not going to be heavy sellers. Do you think they should sell, Bob? I mean, regardless of if fan reaction was not a factor here, do you think it would be a better long-term move for them to sell?
Oh, I do. I think it might even be disappointing the front office they're winning games, making
Yeah,
this a hard decision. No, I think they should sell, just because. I was talking to John Mozeliak of the Cardinals the other day, and obviously nobody wants to sell, but if you do, this is the year to do it. It's such a seller's market where you can get a whole lot more for your players than you should, just because it's such a the inventory is so small.
yeah, I agree with you, and I think that the Cubs put themselves in this position had they not signed Tyone and Swanson. And I mean, like some of the smaller signings, like Mancini, Bellinger, short-term contracts. Those are fine. But I think when you start, I mean, they spent $300 million on like 5 free agents last winter, so that elevated the expectations. It put more pressure on performance right now, and it also made the team get into this middle ground where I personally think they'd be in a better spot if they were just losing games left and right and able to be definitive sellers.
Yeah, and like I said, I mean, they didn't think they get this out of Bellinger. Nobody did. So you're going to sell high.
Yeah,
Stroman was sold real high a month ago. Now
right.
now not so much. This is 6 straight poor starts. So I think people might be saying, wait a minute now, we're not going to give what we wanted to a month ago.
So with those guys, let's say that the Cubs do not trade, they do not sell Bellinger or Stroman. Who do you think are going to be the best players that will be available, or at least might be available with the deadline coming up in a few days?
I think the Padre guys. I think Blake Snell and Josh Hader. If they're traded, and I hear that they will be, or that they're at least
Listening.
telling teams I'll listen.
Yeah.
So those two be in top of the heat. Otherwise a big drop off. You got Lorenzen Rodriguez from Detroit. Not household names. Jordan Hicks has drawn a ton of interest, but the Cubs. The Cardinals want to sign him. Also they got Jordan Montgomery, top starter, and Jack Flaherty with the Cardinals. So Montgomery's drawn a lot of interest. But as far as just more big names, household names, it's really just Snell and Hader.
So no on Soto. They're hanging on to Soto.
Yeah, hang on, Soto. I know I would trade him in a heartbeat, but haven't heard of his name at all.
What might the Mets do? Did the Mets sell like a Mark Canha or someone like that?
Yeah, a Tommy Pham, and Tommy Pham draws a lot of interest in it. Mark Hanna, that sort of thing. Maybe David Robertson, the All-Star closer, not All-Star this year, but All-Star in the past. But not the two big boys. Not Scherzer, or Verlander. They're staying put. But yeah, I think Pham and Kana will definitely be gone.
Another trade that we had yesterday. Really interesting move. I feel like we don't see this too often in baseball. We sometimes see it in other sports, like maybe in the NBA. Was the Dodgers and the Guardians flipped expiring contracts essentially. So Ahmed Rosario goes to the Dodgers. They could use a shortstop, and then the Guardians add Syndergaard, and Syndergaard really has not pitched extremely well. But the Guardians could also use a little bit of pitching, and I think it's really interesting because both those guys were not performing the way that I think either team had hoped. So I think it's really a move where you're looking at Cleveland wants to get some of their young guys opportunities to play in the middle infield. They have a lot of interesting young players and prospects. So it was essentially getting Rosario out of there, and then the Dodgers kind of doing the same thing with Syndergaard.
Yeah, Syndergaard wasn't helping the Dodgers whatsoever. And they need pitching help. He didn't provide it. Been injured most of the year, so he's been a free agent bust. Rosario, they need some offense. He wasn't providing that. And he's been a bust. So it's almost I'll trade your bust for your bust
Yeah.
sort of thing. They made the money work, and Cleveland's had some pitching injuries. They could use some guy to eat up some innings. And certainly, Dodgers never really found a shortstop, and focus on defense. And Rosario's a solid defensive player.
What teams do you expect to be the most aggressive in the next few days?
I'll go with Texas Rangers and
Yeah.
Tampa Bay Rays. Rays have really had a free fall here. I mean, they're about 3 games under 500 for the last 2 months. Texas spent all that money. They're going all in, and I know they would love to get Hicks from St. Louis, or obviously Hader from the Padres, that sort of thing. They could use another starter. They'd love to get Snell, so I think they'd be very aggressive.
I think the AL is shaping up to be more of an arms race than the NL, uh, because I think about those two teams you mentioned. I think the Twins could add. They've been a team that has been pretty active over the last couple of years, making some of these moves. Toronto has been a team that's been pretty active, and we all know that Jerry Dipoto, he likes to make those big splashes and those big moves. And Seattle is only 4.5 games out, despite how maybe disappointing of a first half they've had. So I think we could see a pretty active, even though there isn't a whole lot out there, there could be a bit of an arms race between these teams in the American League.
Yeah, there could be. I mean, especially the big boys in the AL East, for sure. Seattle reminds you of the Padres. They've had 4 months to figure it out. They haven't figured it out. So I think they just kind of stay with what they have. No, those reports are training Logan Gilbert. They're not training Logan
No,
Gilbert. They're not training
no,
with
no way.
that young pitching. So, but yeah, I think they have a very disappointing season, but it's kind of overlooked because of what's happened in San Diego, New York.
And you mentioned the Cardinals. I mean, what kind of moves? Who's available in St. Louis and who is not available?
Well, the two pitchers, Flaherty and Montgomery, pretty much everybody in the bullpen except for maybe not Hicks. They're going to wait and see if they can sign Hicks to extension. They can't sign an extension to move in a heartbeat. Otherwise, all those guys in the bullpen are available. Shortstop Paul DeYoung's available. The two big boys are not. They're not trading Nolan Arenado or Paul Goldschmidt.
And then I guess before we get going for now, just taking a look at the National League, it's a very odd mix of teams. That's where I think a team like the Cubs feels inspired to not sell, because there aren't too many threatening teams, and we have this extra wild card spot now. I mean, there are two teams in front of them before the playoffs, and you got the three wild card teams, three division leaders. But I mean, what do we make of this National League? Because obviously, you spend a good amount of time around the Arizona Diamondbacks, and they looked fantastic up until about a month ago. And then this month of July, they've really, really tailed off. They're a team that could really use a couple of starting pitchers here at the deadline.
Yeah, they could. They've had a terrible July, but it's teams like the Orioles, Cincinnati, Arizona. When you've gone through a rebuild, you're not going to just tear apart your farm
Yeah,
system and change your philosophy and say, "Oh,
yeah.
I'm all in now." You went through the pain for a reason. You want to sustain it. It's like the Baltimore Orioles are carbon copy of what the Astros did. You not only lose, you lose huge. 108, 110, 115 games. And when the Astros finally came back, they never made that big splash at the trade deadline. I mean, even Verlander was a guy who went through waivers in August. Uh, but yeah, just kind of held on to what you have. And I think that's what these teams will do too,
Yeah.
is hold on and make slight improvements, make a move, but nothing that costs you a top five prospect.
Another team that had a terrific first half and probably overachieved was the Miami Marlins. I think they were like 14 or 15 games over 500 at the All-Star break. They've been skidding quite a bit. They're now out of the playoffs. What do you make of the Marlins?
Yeah, I'd like to see them turn back around. I think Skip Schumacher's done a tremendous job. They had a nice winter. Alcantara finally had a good game the other day. Jazz Chisholm's been a bust on that Gallen Chisholm trade. You always say so lopsided in Dimac's favor. But yeah, I think they'll hang around just because the National League is weak enough. And there's only one power in the National League. It's Atlanta. Otherwise, big drop off and a lot of teams with flaws. So,
Yeah.
uh, yeah,
Well,
I don't see.
Even Atlanta, I mean, last year we saw what happened with them in the playoffs, and they strike out a lot, which is sometimes a dangerous recipe for the playoffs.
True. I mean, it's a very good offensive team. The only thing about Atlanta worries you is they've been hit by pitching
Yeah.
injuries, and they've had a few stretches this year, 3 games, 4 games, where they just haven't been the same.
Hey, Cincinnati Reds, couple more teams here we'll touch on. Cincinnati Reds report came out this week that they're open to moving Jonathan India. Do you see that move happening before the deadline, or is that something that maybe happens in the offseason?
It would probably make more sense off season. I think the fear with the India, and they have a ton of middle infielders, so it makes sense to move them. But you got to be careful. We saw what the disaster was when the Brewers traded Hader because
Yeah.
of what he meant in the clubhouse. I
Yep.
think the same thing here with India. If you can move them during the winter. Don't move them now.
And then Philadelphia has been kind of all over the place this year. I mean, it really looked like a hangover season for the first month or two. I thought it would be a hangover season for them coming in. They had an amazing June. They've been kind of up and down since the All-Star break. Are we seeing Dombrowski? I feel like Dombrowski always likes to go out and get a couple of pieces. You think Philly makes a move here?
They'll definitely make a move. They'll have to get another starter, another reliever, another bat, another right-handed bat. So I think they'll definitely be very aggressive at the deadline. They don't have a whole lot of prospects to trade, but I think they'll be aggressive and try to go for this thing. Knowing that thing is wide open, and they can still go deep in October.
Little over 2 months left in the season. Let me get your pick. Who wins the NL Central? Who wins the NL West?
AL West, I'll go Houston Astros. I think
Oh,
this Dusty Baker's
and
best job.
yeah, we could do AL too. I asked about the NL, but yeah, AL West, sure. Astros in the AL
Okay,
West.
yeah, I'll go Astros. If I can get all the other big guys back. NL West, I think the Dodgers will run away with it. I think they win the division by at least 10 games,
Wow, they're
despite all
catching
their
fire
injuries.
now. Yeah,
Yeah, and their teams are just, Diamondbacks have finally reality has hit. Giants, very, up and down. And the Padres are done. And NL Central.
yeah, NL Central.
Yeah, NL Central. I'll go Brewers. You can get Brandon Woodruff back here soon. Corbin Burns is pitching like a Cy Young winner once again. They just know how to win. Christian Yelich has had a marvelous season. The Reds are just 1 year early. A year from now might be a different story, but yeah, 1 year too early.
You think the Reds snag a wild card spot?
I don't. I don't think they end up pitching to, and I don't think they're going to do something stupid and just go for it and kind of showing all the plans they had as far as dealing with prospects for some starter. They're going to have Hunter Green back and Ladelo's going to come back, so you do have some reinforcements along the way. And I think they'll make a move, but nothing big.
I like what the Reds have this year. I thought they were going to win the division until Milwaukee just sort of kicked the crap out of them over the last few weeks. And I think that's really why I would lean Milwaukee is in that. I mean, they're this is their last series of the year. I think they just maybe they finished it or maybe they have a game today. And Milwaukee's going to own that head to head. But not only are they going to own the head to head, but and they instilled the hey, we are the superior team, we are the team to beat, and I think that might shake them up a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, Milwaukee beat them, what did they beat them, 11 times or something?
Yeah,
8 out of 11 times. So, yeah, I mean, Milwaukee's certainly the better team. But the Reds, they lost, 100 games last year. They got to a 4 start again. So they're surprised themselves. But, yeah, the pitching isn't there. They're just 1 year early, and
yeah,
they know it. And so, yeah, and, the thing is, too, are you really going to go all in just to get into the playoffs? And if you're, one and done, you're not going to have any home field, games. So why bother?
yeah. And I mean, this Reds team is looking like a team that could own this division for the next few years with all the young talent like Baltimore.
No, absolutely. They may be the team to beat next few years. Exactly right.
That's why I think the Cubs should be doing the same thing, because Cincinnati accelerated their rebuild by selling those guys, and several of the high impact players that they have right now, such as Jake Fraley, Will Benson, there's another one. Those were guys that they got in trades. Spencer Steer. Those were all guys that they got in trades over the past year, which really accelerated that rebuild. And I think if you aren't going to sell like that, it's going to take longer for you to really get that nice young core up to the majors.
Yeah, on the flip end, look at the Twins the last year. They went for it, got Tyler Mahle from Cincinnati. It cost them those prize guys, getting Castillo from Baltimore. I mean, it was a disastrous trade deadline for them last year. It made sense what they did. They went for it. But prospects are prospects. Sometimes you never know.
Yeah.
They had no idea they were trading away studs like they did.
And speaking of the AL Central, who do you have winning that division?
I've been saying up until a couple of days ago, Cleveland Guardians. I'll
Yeah, me
stick with the
too.
Guardians, but Minnesota's looking good. They're starting to put things together. So I still think the Guardians have a chance. But
Yeah.
again, it's hard not to like the Twins now. And I had a scout the other day think the Twins are going to, go to the World Series. I don't know about that, but they certainly have a nice young starting rotation.
I will be at the Guardians White Sox game tonight in Chicago, and this could be, I mean, this is kind of how this race might play out, is take turns ganging up on the bad teams. So Minnesota cleaned up on Oakland like a week ago, swept them. Cleveland's got to pick up you got to go for a sweep here against the White Sox, especially when there's this whole trade deadline lingering over them, and they just traded Giolito.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, they're down the dumps. I mean, they've been a bad team anyway, but yeah, down the dumps and get them, kick them when they're down. Yeah, you got to take advantage of that. You got to beat the bad teams who already kind of given up for the season.
All right, Bob. Is there anything else that we didn't touch on today that you'd like to touch on?
No, I think we're good.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. He's Bob Nightengale. It's at B Nightengale on Twitter, right?
Yep, it is.
Anything you want to plug or promote? Tell people to check out your work.
No, you stay. Find my stories on usatoday.com. Always on the baseball front there, as far as latest features, stories, notebooks, that sort of thing.
Well, thank you for your time today, Bob. Make sure you get some naps and some rest in, because I imagine you'll be working quite a bit over the next week.
It sounds good. I will, Jack.
All right, y'all. That concludes my conversation today with Bob Nightengale. Should be a very fun trade deadline. Hopefully, we'll get a lot of big moves and big stories, and be really interesting to see how these teams are set up going into the final 2 months of the season. I mean, I can't believe we're already almost in August. It's been a fast year, really fast year, if you ask me. But hopefully you guys enjoyed today's episode. We aren't going to have a baseball episode out for at least a week, maybe a couple weeks. I'm going on vacation next week to Eagle River, Wisconsin. I'm going to be out of town. I have pre-recorded a couple of episodes that I will drop in the next week or two, especially while I'm gone. So the next couple episodes, we're going to speak with sports reporter Haley Jordan. Haley just won the Miss Indiana USA crown. It was a fun conversation about her time in the pageant world, some sports, some faith. And then we also have coming out probably the following week, so 2 weeks from now, maybe a little less than that, we will have Amanda Clark Stoner from Peacock's hit reality show, The Traders, talk about her time on that show, talk a little bit about faith and life. She's got an amazing story, an incredible life story. She's overcome a lot in her life, really has lived a rough life from a young age, but has an inspirational story of how she found Jesus and how that has changed her life, how her faith has changed her life, and how she's gotten out of some really bad situations that she had been in due to the difficulties and adversity that she had to face. If you guys like the Jack Vita Show, make sure you subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever it is that you get your podcasts. You're not going to want to miss out. We've got more coming up. Like I said, you can follow me on social media at Jack Vita Show on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We'll be back probably in a couple weeks or so. We'll talk some more baseball. We'll give you some more baseball analysis, and we'll see what happens at the deadline. Until then, I'm Jack Vita. Bring in the dancing lobsters.